feel the weight of an elephant walking past. Now, I'm trying not to be consumed by my burning jealousy, but let's go quickly across to Tristan for one last glimpse of the wonderful shadow.
Well, Jamie, I must admit, if you were here, I would also have jealousy, and it is such a special thing to spend time with a leopard and her cub. So I'm pretty sure before you leave, or maybe this afternoon, Jamie, you'll be able to find a shadow and you'll spend some time with this cub. It's been James, and it's only fitting that you shall be next and see her and the cub together. So I'm hoping that they're going to rest here for the day and you'll be able to get a look at this little cute cub as well. But you can see they're in a thicket now, and I wonder if this is not where they're going to actually decide just to spend the day and rest a little bit. I'm trying to just turn the radio down because the guys are shouting in my ear a little bit, but I'm sure this is where she might just rest and leave the cub. If she does decide to leave here, this is a great place to leave a cub. Just look how thick it is in there. It's perfect places for that cub to spend time and sort of hide away from any potential threat. So really is a good spot. Well done, Shadow. And that's why she uses the strain edge line a lot, is because it's very difficult for us and for anything else to actually get inside here. So, Siobhan, you're wondering how old a leopard cub is when it starts to climb trees. Well, it really can start climbing trees from about 8 weeks old, but they really are only proficient in climbing a tree by 3 months. So 12 weeks, they're able to then start climbing very, very well. And it's generally from 3 months is when they can start evading things like hyenas and varying other predators. Now, we are probably going to have to make a little bit of space for the other vehicles that are going to come, but what I want to do is make space and let them come in, and then we'll try and get into the back of the lineup again and come in back a little bit later so that we can get to spend more time, because it's just so addictive to be with a leopard and a cub, that's for sure. And like I say, we've been spoiled this morning. We've been really, really, really spoiled, and so lucky. So, James, you're wondering if Shadow will have a better success rate if she needs to raise one cub instead of two. Well, I think it's negligible. I mean, the sort of, she's already lost one, so we know that she had two, so her success rate is only 50% anyway. Yes, I suppose it is easier for her. It's less food that she has to catch, but she still has to leave it in places. She still has to choose correct areas to leave something in order for it to be able to survive. So it's still, whether it's one or two, doesn't really influence her decisions that she needs to make. The only thing that is easier is that she doesn't have to provide nearly as much food as she would have had to provide if it was two of them. Being a little female as well, it also means that she doesn't have to provide as much food as if it was a male. So from a food point of view, yes, it is easier. From a sort of protection point of view, it really makes not too much difference. Two cubs is still got to hide them, still got to look after them, still got to protect them. So whether it's one or two is really negligible. But let's hope that she's through the hardest part. The first 6 months are always the hardest with the leopard. It's where they really struggle. Now, see, she is moving deeper into that thicket, and there are vehicles that want to come. So I'm definitely going to make space for them. And like I say, we'll try to get back into the lineup, and if there's still visual of her, then we'll definitely try and come back. I just want to direct these guys as to where to go. So I just need to get onto the radio. Monet, she's just mobile north away from us here. So if you come around to where I am, you'll get visual of her. So she's just going into that thicket now. I think the cub must be somewhere in the back there. There's like a little gap that I can see she's now moving into, and that would be the perfect place for a cub to hide. I actually think I can see the cub moving around with mom there. And let me try to go forward a bit for you, Craig, so you can see. Come on, car, a little bit forward. When I just straight in line with this gap here at that Tamboti, she's underneath there. Yeah, I'm going to try just move so you can come through here. I don't want to go crashing around because I don't want these guys not to be able to see. These are some of the guys that I know quite well, and they really want to get a sort of sighting of this particular cub. So just go straight through, Monet, at the base of that Tamboti there. cool bin. So they're going to go and try and relocate, and I think we're going to make some space and let some of the others in. And like I say, we'll try to see if we can't come back a little bit later, but let's just rejoice in the fact that we've had the most incredible morning. Wild dogs, leopard cubs, what an absolute treat. So let's carry on, see what else we can find. You never know, maybe we get lucky with something else. It seems to be one of those mornings. Craig is obviously wearing his lucky underpants, and while we do that, let's go across to James Henry. I wonder if he's got his lucky underpants on.
My lucky underpants on? I didn't know I had a pair of lucky underpants. I've got red underpants on. I don't know if that's lucky or not. I'm also not sure if I should have told you that or not. Probably not. Too much information? TMI? Yeah. I'm lying here, not just because it's comfortable, but because we have found a spider hunting wasp that is dead. And Herbert believes it to have fallen victim to what was its intended victim, which was probably the owner of this hole. Quite possibly a baboon spider, or tarantula, as most of you will note. And I just think it's beautiful to see these wasps like this, because we hear them going all around us, and we see them flying past, but to get them on camera is almost impossible unless they are like this one, expired. And I find it quite satisfying, in fact, that it has been killed, if it has been killed by a spider, because I feel the spiders have a really rough time from these wasps. I don't think it's very nice for them at all to have to live in fear of being paralyzed and having wasp eggs laid in them. Isn't it beautiful colors? Like a starling. Let's just pick it up and see. We'll turn it over. Let me turn it over for you. It's a pity we're not actually near the tent, so we could dissect it there and have a look at its ovipositor. I don't know what the males of these species look like. I suspect they are probably a lot smaller and probably not nearly as impressive to look at, and probably go about almost completely unnoticed. Now, the enormous surface area, of course, of the wings here is essential, because this wasp will carry a spider probably the same mass as itself as it goes along. And I wonder if we couldn't just tease open the legs slightly, just to see if there aren't sort of hooks on them, perhaps. Yeah, and Marco, you say I should save it for the microscope. I must say I wouldn't mind doing that, but to try and carry it home without damaging it is going to be nigh on impossible. I wonder also if these things don't sometimes get killed by their own kind, and maybe they fall victim to other wasps that might want to parasitize them. Maybe pick it up and put it on my hand. Now, I don't see its sting. Now, dear watcher, you said, does a spider hunting wasp ever sting people? Dear watcher, I'm almost certain that it would sting people if it could. Not if it could, if it was felt threatened enough. And I'm just trying to look at its backside now to see if I can see any sign of a sting, but I don't think I can. But I'm pretty sure that this would do some seriously painful stinging. They will almost universally avoid people, though. Laura, you want to know if it's fuzzy at all? No, it's not at all, actually. It doesn't feel in the slightest bit fuzzy. Shall I hold it to the light, Ferg? Is it right?
Yep.
It doesn't feel fuzzy. I suppose the wings look a little bit fuzzy. Let me touch one of them. No, they're totally membranous. There's very short little black hairs on the abdomen there, but not much. What a fascinating creature. There's a spike, and you see that there. I'm not sure you're going to get it there. On the bottom of the leg there, or halfway down the leg. And I'm sure that's what it uses to carry its spidery prey. Let's turn it over. Infinity Killer, you say, do these things only lay their eggs on spiders, or would they perhaps, use another host? I think you'll find that they're almost exclusively lay them on spiders. Various other wasp species will use caterpillars and one or two other insect species, but largely they are very specific to what they want to eat. And I think you'll find that there are probably different spider hunting wasps that actually specialize in different types of spiders. And I suspect this one specializes in ground-dwelling baboon spiders. How it finds them is astounding to me. No one, I don't believe, has any true understanding of how on earth this brainless wasp, and it is brainless, I mean it doesn't have a brain, it's got a very sort of rudimentary nervous system, how it manages to find the spiders that it catches is beyond me. And then it catches those spiders, of course, and it takes them back to a pre-dug hole. And that also blows my mind. How does it know where its hole is? How does it know where to dig? How does it have a navigational mechanism capable of doing all this? Which is fantastic. Now, before we got here, we were walking along the road thinking, gosh, these look like very large and very fresh elephant tracks, and it would seem that Tristan may have found the terminal end of those tracks.
Well, we have, but I don't know if it's the same terminal end of those elephant tracks, but this is a very large bull that is slowly feeding his way through the thickets. And it seems our luck is continuing. We just kind of left shadow and out popped this big bull elephant and right in front of us. So really, really cool to see him as well. And I think he's slowly making his way now towards Red Dam, where he's going to probably go and have a nice drink. It's getting a lot warmer than it was this morning, and slowly but surely he's heading in that direction. But when you're going towards water, it's always good to have a feed on the way and make sure you keep such a large body sustained. And it's amazing, I was just thinking this morning how we went from elephants everywhere on Djuma to now it seems like the elephants are a little bit more scarce again. So it seems they've all kind of started to move off, although when we were with the wild dogs we did go flying past a elephant earlier, so I would imagine that there are still some of the bulls lurking around that were on the scent of those females and all those big herds that we did have. But it just amazes me how they come and go so quickly, that it kind of one day they're everywhere, the next day they're missing. But it definitely has gotten warm quickly. Now that the sun is quite high in the sky, it's getting very hot, and I would imagine that this elephant is starting to get a little bit on the warm side, and that's probably why the ears are starting to flap a bit and starting to move towards water. But isn't it amazing how a big elephant bull, and that bull probably weighs easily 5 tons, just completely disappears. You can't even see him behind that tree. They kind of just blend in so well. That grey tone that they have, particularly now as it starts to dry out, just matches the sort of bleak vegetation that we get in the winter, where everything starts to become those sort of lifeless trees, and the greys of the branches, the actual elephant sort of blends in so well. I wonder if there's a herd around here, because we did have tracks for a herd as well. I wonder if he's not just slowly but surely following on that herd. It seems like he might be. I'm going to roll back a bit because there's a nice sort of clearing that he's going to come into now, so we don't have to stare at him through the obscured bush. There we go. Hello, buddy. But it is sometimes just sitting with elephants like this and just in the sunshine, and it's one of the most relaxing things. He's so relaxed, and it's just kind of lulls you into the same sort of sense. He's just feeding along, and it's all very peaceful. And sometimes sitting with Ellie bulls like this just makes you remember just how nice it is to be out here and just to sit in sort of quiet and listen to the sounds and spend time in the company of an old wise giant. Is always really cool. What's inside that wattle that you want? So Gobble Gobble, you're a new viewer. Welcome to the show. It's wonderful to have you joining the Safari Live family, and I hope you are enjoying this show. You've joined on a very good day because we've had all kinds of action this morning, and you're wondering how the elephants communicate with each other. Well, they have three big forms of communication. One is via scent, so wherever they drop their dung or urine, one another will smell and be able to kind of pick that up. The other is through sound. They make a very wide vocal array of sounds. They'll trumpet, they'll use these grumbles, they'll use sort of very low frequency sound that people can't hear, that they can pick up, and that's probably the main way that they communicate, is through this low frequency sound and low frequency waves that they produce. And the third way is through sight, and they will often, you'll find with elephants, if they are come together, there'll be lots of posturing, so they'll make their ears go out, they'll lift their heads if they want to. There's a lot of sort of subtle movements of their bodies that communicate to the rest of the herd as to what they're doing. If they shake their head from side to side, trunk going over the tusk, varying other sort of ways that they will communicate visually, but most of their communication is through sound. Now I want to just turn around because he is slowly going towards the dam, and so we can then follow him and see if he is going to indeed have a little drink, which I think he will do. Craig, can I go on your side there? Am I right? I'm not going to hit anything? Roshni, you're wondering if this bull is around 10 or 12 years old. No, Roshni, this bull is most definitely nowhere near 10 or 12 years old. 10 or 12-year-old bull will still be with his herd. They won't be separated from the herd. Remember, bull elephants only leave the herd between 12 and 15, and they will be probably, I would say, a third of the size of this bull. This bull is massive. He's a very, very large animal, and so he is probably a fully grown individual at around, I would say he's easily in his late 20s, early 30s already. So he's about 3 times the age of what you were asking. You can see now when he comes across the road, look at that height of where he is up against that dead tree. Now as he goes past the dead tree, I will stop and go and walk there, and then you'll get a better sense. So you can do a screenshot there of the ellie next to the tree, and then I will go once he's gone, and I'll go and park in exactly the same place, and you can then, some of our very clever viewers can do some Photoshop work, and we'll show you just how big that elephant is in comparison to my height. A 10-year-old elephant would probably be just a little bit taller than what I am, so you'll find that a 10-year-old will be probably just over 6 foot, whereas this guy is easily already probably about 3 meters at the shoulder, so he's way bigger than what I am. So now he seems to be going off. I've got to wait for him just to get a little bit further before I can go and stand next to the tree. It should be not too long. He's going down towards the water, so I know that once he gets down there, I'll be able to do it, no problem. Now, with elephants, obviously, you don't want to cause too much of a problem. And the reason why I want him to go in so I can stay in the same place is because then we'll get the same relative angle as what it was when he was there. So he's just disappearing now behind the trees, so it shouldn't be too much longer, and I can go there. A few more seconds. There we go. And he's now going down the hill, and so all is good. Right. So, for those of you that like to do screenshots, we can try now. Craig, just tell me when I'm in the right spot.
You're gonna lose audio probably.
Now I'm going to try to see if I can find where he crossed, but it was right here. So if I stand where he was standing, there we go. Now this is where I am, and the elephant bull crossed over here. So those clever viewers that are out there that can do these photo comparisons, that will be able to show you just how big that bull elephant was, and you'll see that he is massive in comparison to me, and I'm not exactly the smallest human that we have in this team. So James often calls me beefy, which I'm not sure if I've taken to just yet, but I'm definitely not the smallest, so you'll be able to get a good sort of size reference as to how big that is. And remember, like I say, with these older males, they'll spend a lot more time on their own, whereas those younger bulls will either be in the company of a big bull like this, or will be still with the herd if they're young enough. Now, let's quickly catch up with him while he goes to the dam. I'm sure he's going to be drinking by the time we get there. He was on a serious mission to get towards the water. So Green Day, elephants don't scent mark as per se, so they're not like a territorial animal like a lion or a leopard or a rhino that will scent mark. These guys are animals that will drop dung and drop urine in places, but it's not designed for scent. And there we go. Oh boy, well, you found yourself some water. Isn't that nice? He's found himself some shade too. He's decided that he doesn't want to stand in the sun while he drinks, so he's using the bank for a bit of shade. You can see there he's blending in quite well. And isn't it nice with the shadow as well on the water and that spray? How amazing is that? So no, they don't scent mark. They'll drop dung and urine wherever they want, and the reason why is because they're not a territorial animal. So any animal that is territorial will be the ones that scent mark. The animals that have home ranges, which is what an elephant does, typically don't scent mark because they don't actually have to control an area. They're just going to make sure that they have enough food and water within their range, and because they don't actually look after a sort of herd of elephants on their own, they'll just go in and out and mate with females as and when they come into their must cycles, and so that means that they really don't actually spend very much time at all trying to mark territory. They just wander around, and when the opportunity to mate comes in, then they do it. But isn't that amazing? Look at the spray coming out with the backlight. So cool. I wonder if maybe Craig, if you can get quite close in there, and maybe we can get a close-up of all the spray, and you can see just how much actually gets pushed out by this elephant. There we go. Now hopefully it will do it. There we go. Isn't that amazing? So it's as he's breathing out, he's kind of spitting some of that water, and it ends up coming in this sort of fine mist. Now it's always so nice just to stop and listen to the sounds of an elephant drinking. Listen to that. You can hear the water dribbling from his trunk and his lips and his mouth. Now Amy G, wondering what the life expectancy is of an elephant. Well, here in the Sabi Sands, or in the Greater Kruger National Park area, our average life expectancy for an elephant is about 55 years old. Alright, so that's the average. They can get a little bit older, and sometimes they die a little bit younger. If we go into parts of Botswana and Kenya and those areas where it's more grassland and the elephants are not feeding off nearly as much wooded vegetation, then you'll find that their life expectancy goes up a little bit, and it'll go up towards almost 70 years. And the reason why is because what happens with an elephant is it only has... Oh, poor lapwing just got absolutely covered in water. Sorry, little blacksmith lapwing. So what happens with ellies is that they only get 6 sets of teeth in their lifetime. And so as those teeth wear down, a new set comes in, and once the 6th set is finished, that's the end of it. They're no longer able to feed properly, and a lot of them actually do die from starvation, effectively, from not being able to feed. And so what happens is the elephants here in this area, because we're in such a wooded environment, they eat a lot of bark and a lot of hard abrasive materials. They dig up a lot of roots, and that causes them to grind down those teeth a little bit faster than their counterparts in the open grassland savannas of the Masai Mara and the Serengeti and the Okavango Delta, where they feed off much softer vegetation, and their teeth then tend to last slightly longer, and you end up with a situation where their life expectancy is slightly higher. In captivity, funny enough, they reckon that elephants, given the right diet from an early age, could actually live to as long as 90 years old. So it's very similar to us as people, quite long-lived animals. And in fact, actually, they lived much longer than we would ever have lived had we not invented medicine. So you can imagine these guys don't have access to medicine like what we do, and yet they're still able to live to the ripe old age of 60, 70, which is really very, very cool. But isn't he a beautiful individual? Such a gentle giant, this guy. He's in no way been fazed by us. Even when he crossed the road, he didn't look at us for 1 second. He just seems to be taking it very easy. Now you'll find every now and then with the trunk, they'll just sort of disturb the surface water, and the reason why they're doing it is because there's surface tension, which traps a lot of dirt, a lot of dust, insects, and so they break that surface tension, and then they can drink the actual cleaner water underneath there and not have to suck up all that dust and dirt. You'll also find when they drink, he'll take up quite a lot of water, and then as the trunk bends, you'll find sediment develops in that little sort of bend, and you'll find, look, he'll drink, and then you'll throw the last bit out. There we go, and that's going to be the stuff that's got all the sediment in it that he doesn't actually want to drink. So, Violet, you're wondering if these water holes are man-made. Some of them are, some of them not. This particular water hole that we're at is actually man-made. And funnily enough, this was a area that was used. You can actually see the scrape marks in the bank there. They used this to build a lodge that is nearby. So they excavated from here to help with the building of that lodge. And then it started to fill up with water. Now, because of all the years of it having water through rains, and the animals are quite reliant on this particular waterhole, and we don't have too many other waterholes close by, they actually start to pump this waterhole now. So this will have water in it all year round. If it was not pumped, no, it wouldn't. This waterhole would dry out, and in fact last year it did dry out a few times, and so only because it's pumped will it keep water in it all year round. And it's amazing how much it's dropped already. If you look on this left hand side here, Craig, which is probably a good place to check, you'll see actually how much this water has dropped over the last few weeks. So in this little corner here, you can actually see the water was up there at the beginning of summer, so probably about a month and a half ago, 2 months ago, it got up to about that level, and it's slowly but surely receding, and you can actually see the darkness of the mud, and that's how much it's dropping each day. Is that little dark ring that you see, it's probably dropping, I would say, 2 to 3 inches a day. We're getting quite warm weather during the middle of the day, but it's very dry at the moment. We haven't had rain for probably over a week now, and so the rain that we did have would have soaked into the soil and wouldn't have really contributed much to this dam. So it is drying quite fast, and you might find a situation where this will become much smaller in the winter, but it is a vitally important dam in the winter months. The amount of animals that I've seen drinking at this dam is unbelievable. The leopards, for some reason, absolutely love it here, and I know the Nkuhuma pride come here quite often, elephants all the time, and buffalo herds. If we get buffalo herds, they come here often, and it's quite an interesting thing, because with buffalo, this is not in a good place for them to be. You can see this particular waterhole almost has like a bowl shape to it. It's got very steep banks on all sides, and that bowl shape almost becomes like an arena, and the buffalo come piling in here. So you'll get a herd of 60, 70, 100, and they all try and get in here. And I've seen the Nkuhuma pride hunt them, and the Nkuhuma pride uses the ridge on top, and they come down, and once they're in here, the buffalo are trapped in here, and they then chase them up the riverbed and they grab them there. So it's a very good place for lions to hunt. But when you're desperate in the winter months and there's no other water, then as a buffalo, I suppose you've got to come down and try and drink as much as possible. Now, I think we're probably going to leave our Ellie bull to enjoy his water and enjoy his last little few sips, and then we're going to carry on and see what else we can find. Now, I'm sure Jamie's luck is going to change this morning as well, and we're going to basically, hopefully, she'll be able to find something interesting too. Now, thank you, Ellie. That was very, very nice of you. I enjoyed our time with you this morning. Now, I'm just trying to turn around because I want to go the other way. I don't want to go back to where Shadow was. So I'm going to try and see if I can get this side. Now, while we do that, let's go across to James Henry for an update on his bushwalk. It surely must be so lovely to be walking in this morning sunshine.
It is actually. It's really very pleasant walking in the morning sunshine. We had a very nice elephant sighting, just the three of us. It was a very private elephant sighting. The elephant came down through this drainage here, through the riverbed, and he was headed off. And so before we could even get him on camera, he was gone, I'm afraid. But we enjoyed watching him. We're at Twin Dams, and if you come with me, I will show you 2 hippopotami that have popped out into the Twin Dams area. We've also seen some footprints, I'm not going to use the term tracks anymore, of Hosana around here. So maybe he had a drink around here during the course of the night, and maybe we'll pick something up from him. But who knows? It is just as Tristan says, a glorious morning to be wandering the great African wilderness. There is a carpenter bee of sorts. It is flying with an intimidating speed and directional changes that make it impossible to get on camera. You will notice that Fergus is not even trying, and you can see how fast my head is moving, trying to follow where it's going. That is really astounding. Right, come, let's go and have a look at the hippo. They're just down here. Tristan, of course, has had all the luck. He has taken all the luck from me and from Jamie, which wasn't very nice of him. If I knew how to take all the luck, though, I'd take it myself. There is Herberto, just making sure that the hippopotamus are ready for you. And Louise says I had all the luck the other day. Louise, I want all the luck all the time, every day. That's how it works. And she says I have to share. Piffle to that. Now, let's walk gently along here and see if they will stick their heads out of the water for us. Here they are. Hi guys. Good morning. How are you? Are you two young bulls or are you a young lovers couple? One definitely braver than the other. Now if you're watching hippo like this, you do well to make sure that you follow the movement of the hippo under the water. That one that's just sunk down is not moving as far as I can see. It's just sunk straight down, so it should pop up exactly where it went down. And what they do, of course, there it is they move under the water, and so sometimes you don't see them. You just see a sort of shallow bow wave going along the surface of the water. And of course, if that was coming speedily towards the shoreline, we would have been best advised to disappear with great speed. But they don't seem to have any problem with us. Although Fergus has just knelt down, which has given them a great sense of fear, and so they've both disappeared under the water. Neither of them moving at the moment. They're both exactly where they were. There, now there's movement. They're rolling around there. Yeah, just took a few steps closer. And as you all know, we keep talking about the fact that hippo are responsible for more mammal damage to human beings than any other animal in Africa. But if they're in the water, they're normally completely safe. Now that is not to say that you should ever become complacent about it, because I have seen incidents where hippos will come out of the water at people because they feel threatened. And so we'll watch them with very great care, and we're sufficiently far away from them now to get away before they could get out of the water. And one of them is feeling quite nervous. Can you see that one at the back there, Ferg? It's just sticking its nostrils out to breathe and then disappearing back down under the water. It's got surprisingly warm quite quickly today. But that is the early winter for you. Right, Herbert has got something else here. Let's go and have a look, Ferg. I'm told now it's only 17 degrees still. Yeah, there's still a chill when you're not in the sun. There is a certain chill. 62 degrees Fahrenheit. What have you got, Herbert? Lilies?
Lily?
Ah, yes, well spotted. He's got the great water monitor over there. Brilliant spotting. Can you see the tree that's leaning heavily to the right there, Ferg? Not this close one, the next one, in the middle of the water. You got it? In the middle of the water, and then on the bottom of the trunk, the water monitor is attached itself. You see it there?
Yeah.
Yes, you've got it. Well spotted. The water monitor enjoying the sun in much the same way as I was on my termite mound when we started this drive. I mean, that really is quite a special picture. That is a big water monitor, who has made his home here, his or her home. And I say her because she looks very fat, and I wonder if she isn't about to produce some eggies. From which little water monitors will emerge eventually. And I'm afraid I don't know at all how long that would take, or how many eggs there would be. Now this is exactly the kind of environment that you'd want to come and stop in, set up what we call a scuttle or a gas barbecue, and cook yourself a very fine fry-up with some delicious strong coffee, and just see what came down to the water during the course of a magnificent early winter's morning in the northeast corner of the world's most beautiful country, that is South Africa. with a monitor of the water. Marvellous. Good. Let us continue. We're going to continue walking along the dam wall, down off the other side, and then we're going to make our way towards Treehouse Dam, which is not too far from here, in that sort of direction. And we're doing that just to see if further footprints do not cross over our boundary, or not, as the case may be. It's extremely quiet from a bird point of view at the moment. Almost nothing. Just the odd starling calling, and it gives the feeling that it's going to be very hot today. Alrighty, I believe that we are going to leave Bushwalk for the moment, and we're going to head across to Mr. Lucky and find out what he's got.
James, you are another story, I'm afraid. There's very few people in this world like James Hendry. The comedic talent that he has is quite something. Now, we have left Arathusa, but hang on a second. I want to just see something quickly. I thought for a second there I saw a track for a lion. It's been that kind of morning that it could have been possible. We've had so much luck already, and Craig has been the one. Now I see there's tracks for a leopard, which I think must be Shadow's tracks, going towards Triple M, because she was found on Triple M. So that's where she must have come from. But it has been that kind of morning that it wouldn't have surprised me if we had found tracks for lions this morning as well. But I believe the Styx Pride went into Torchwood and are somewhere around there. So maybe, just maybe, we'll get lucky. Oh, sorry if we have a spider web on the lens. I don't see one. But I'll try and just clear it anyway. Oh, there we go. I found it. Sorry about that, everybody. It's difficult. In the mornings, the spiders are very active at night, and so when we go crashing through the bushes like we did with Shadow earlier, we often end up picking them up and going all over the lenses, so I do apologize about that. Now, we're back on Djuma and just really bumbling around, hoping that we will find something else. And like I said, the Styx Pride are on Torchwood, or they crossed into Torchwood, so I would imagine that their tracks will be somewhere close to the eastern boundary of Djuma, which could pose a good possibility to round off our Catterday this afternoon with some lions. Now, we do have a lonely male impala. Hello, buddy. Now, don't run away. That's what he thinks of us. Well, clearly he's not very impressed with us arriving on the scene, and he's just telling us exactly how unimpressed he really is. This morning when we started the drive, and as we kind of came out, there was the most insane fight going on quarantine clearings with the impala males. Two males were locked in battle, their horns were together, there was dust flying everywhere, and other males just started arriving from every direction, and it almost looked like a school of kind of fish. And sometimes, I don't know if any of you have been fishing, and particularly things like tuna, if you hook at one, the rest of the school follows them, and it was almost like that. There was, while these two male impalas were fighting, the rest of them all started coming in and were following and almost trying to get into the action themselves and try and fight with one another, and it was just chaos as they were chasing each other around. So it was really, really cool to see, and I haven't seen a big impala fight like that in a long, long time. So I wonder if maybe this evening or tomorrow morning I'm going to try to see if I can't get onto quarantine at the same sort of time and see if we can't show you all this incredible sort of battle that takes place. It seems to happen quite often on quarantine because there's such a concentration of impalas in that area that at sort of early hours of the morning, as that sun breaks, the feistiness of all of them starts to come out, and you end up with a situation where they do start to go at one another. Oh, just tracks for civets on the road. I thought it might be Shadow's cub that had walked here, so I was just checking to see. It would be nice to know where she actually came from with that cub and where the cub had been hidden. I wonder if it's not been on Djuma the last few days. It's quite difficult, the area where she was, especially on the Djuma side. It's a really large area with no roads, and it's very dense and thick in there with quite tall grass, so not a place to really track leopards that easily. And as we start to dry out now, it will become a little bit easier, and we know that Shadow really likes to spend time in there. It's a perfect place for a leopard, but not so much for us as people as we kind of track along. So I wonder if we shouldn't go and check around Treehouse Dam. I'm sure Jamie has been there at some point this morning, but you never know. It's starting to warm up a little bit, and maybe we get lucky with something coming towards the dam for a drink, like our Ellie bull that we had just now. It'd be nice to maybe find some buffalo. Ooh, this is a big hypothetical, but I'll try and answer to what I think is going to happen. But Michael, you're wondering who would potentially take over from Tingana once he sort of gets a little bit older and moves out. This is obviously his territory at the moment, and he's still fit and healthy, and we're not saying that he is getting old and is going to be evicted anytime soon. But hypothetically, if he were to disappear, who would be next in line? Well, I think Anderson Male would definitely start pushing deeper in on the western side. In fact, he was seen this morning, and I was so upset because as we kind of got to Shadow and Cub, he was found crossing over from Arathusa into Shirley's property. So it would have been so cool to catch up with the big guy, but he was crossing southwards, so we'll just monitor. But you never know, maybe this afternoon he comes back towards Arathusa. But Anderson would definitely push from the western side, and he would probably be in all likelihood a male that we'd start to see roaming on the fringes of the west. You'd find Djuma is already starting to push a little bit from the north. There's been a leopard that we've been hearing most mornings lately calling from that Buffelshoek area, sort of Buffelshoek Dam, which is most definitely Djuma, so he would be pushing there. And then you'd find Quarantine would definitely start coming from the east and pushing further west. So those three would all kind of merge together, and they would just suck up chunks of it, as far as I could imagine. I don't think anybody would come in and just take over Tingana's whole territory in one foul swoop. There's going to be other males that are all on his fringes that he's keeping at bay, that are all going to try and push at the same time, and you're going to end up with a situation where everybody's going to kind of enclose that territory and take over little chunks of it, much like what happens with females. And the same with now, if Karula is indeed gone, then you'll find that slowly but surely Shadow, Tandi, Tiani, potentially Shongile will all sort of glean sections off of that and try and take it. But hopefully Karula will be back at some point, and we'll be lucky enough to see her. I think it's becoming almost desperate nowadays, that the sort of time frame that we're in. It seems like, I'm sure that she's unfortunately missing for far too long now, that we might have to prepare ourselves for the worst. But we shall keep on hoping, just in case. You never know, she could pop out somewhere. I know there's been tracks of adult females in random places on Djuma, which could be her, but you never know. Now, in terms of other males, I actually don't know of any other males around this area, so Quarantine would be probably, and like I say, Djuma and Anderson, those three. Other than that, there really is no males to speak of. Sindile used to be around. I just haven't heard any updates about him for quite a while now. It's been probably about 2 months since I last heard somebody saw him. So, he's a young male, and he probably is distributed out. We're very, very packed with male leopards up here at the moment. If you think that's in this sort of 7,000 hectare area, you've got 4 massive big males competing for that territory. So it really is not a lot of space for 4 big guys like that, and it means that I'm sure Sindile unfortunately has been evicted from this area, and he's now trying to find his own place to be a dominant male leopard, and I'm hoping that he'll find somewhere. I don't know what goes on in southern Manyaleti, but maybe that's an area for him, but we'll see. Oh, Kim Umvula, the old war hero, who I suppose he's not that old, but he's one of those impressive leopards that has sort of felt like he's been around forever, because he's been in this area for quite a while. I would say he's probably, I have never seen Quarantine, so it's difficult for me to make a size comparison in Quarantine, but he is definitely slightly smaller than Tingana and Anderson, that's for sure. Djuma I've also never seen, but Brent tells me he's quite a large leopard and very similar in size to Tingana, so I would say Mvula probably ranks slightly smaller than that. Now, there's an elephant to my right, which I almost didn't notice, and they're almost on their way to Treehouse Dam. I can see the rest of the herd here on my left-hand side, but this one is probably the best view. So Mvula, I would say probably at the moment, because he's no longer a territorial male, we don't see him vocalizing, scent marking, he probably ranks down below even Quarantine these days. But in terms of size, I would imagine he's probably very similar, if not bigger than Quarantine at the moment, with Quarantine still going to develop and get bigger. And remember that Mvula has lost quite a bit of size as he's gotten older. This is what happens as the body starts to break down a little bit, and you find that they're not as muscular as they would have been in their prime. So he's probably lower down on the pecking order, should we say. But in terms of when he was in his heyday, he was an absolute brute. He wasn't the tallest leopard, but he was very wide and very, very muscular and powerful. So he was a leopard that you wouldn't want to mess around with. And I think he probably looked a lot stronger. I mean, was a lot stronger than what he actually looked. I saw him take down some massive animals, so he was definitely not a small leopard by any stretch of the imagination. But the problem is when you see Anderson and Tingana, and I mean, those are both big boys, and particularly Anderson, and he makes all the others seem a little bit insignificant in a way in terms of size. So it's always difficult when after seeing him. Now you can see our Ellie bulls. Well, this is a young elephant bull, and there seems to be another one here. I don't know if it's a herd that we're onto or just a couple bull elephants that are sort of going slowly down towards Treehouse Dam, but he seems as though he's almost taking a nap there. Were you just listening to us and seeing what we were doing? Now, slowly but surely winding their way. It's like I was saying, getting quite warm, so that's why I wanted to head towards Treehouse, because I would imagine that these guys in particular would start moving towards the dam, and it would be nice to have a nice herd at the dam itself. Now, this particular male, you can see, is definitely a boy. He's letting it all hang out at this stage. Put it away. We know you're a boy. You can see, look, he's just listening to us now. He's a little unsure of who we are, so ears are out just to listen better, stop feeding, just to make sure that we're not a threat. And there we go. Once he's sort of decided that we're not something to worry about, he'll carry on feeding. And this is a younger male, younger than what we saw just now, even though he's got quite long tusks. He definitely is a little bit younger. Do you want to come this way? I'm just going to back up a little bit because there is a path that he wants to come on that unfortunately I may be blocking. So I'm just going to go back and give him some space to go through. There you go. We've opened a space for you. Off you go. So unfortunately in front here you see there's a big wattle tree, and then behind that there's some fallen over trees which I didn't see. So the path that we had parked on was the path that he wanted to use, and that's why he was just politely asking us to move, and I'm sure once we're out the way he'll start to come out onto the road. Do you want more space? Is that what you're asking for? No, found something in the bush that we'd rather feed off instead. Now look how he uses his feet. It's amazing. It always amazes me how they're able to do this. They basically use their trunk and wrap it around, and then they use the feet just to leverage and break it off. It's incredible to watch. Now, sometimes you'll find that they have displacement behavior where he's watching us and he's pretending to feed. So I'm just checking him out and just seeing, because it seems like he's putting things in his mouth but not actually eating it. Well, you just want keeping an eye on us. But those eyes look like they're almost closing in this morning light. Kind of every now and then they're just drooping a little bit. Are you tired, my boy? Okay. No. Look at that. Isn't that amazing? That is so cool. Don't break that tree on us. Now, he's not very far from us at all, so when you start pulling off branches like this, it's not ideal for our well-being, because hopefully we're not going to get a branch on top of our heads. And it's still far enough away that I don't have to stress too much at this stage. This is so cool. The elephants this week have been phenomenal. In fact, it's probably been some of the best elephant sightings I've had in many years. We've been spoilt with swimming elephants and big herds together, and just proximity as well. A lot of the elephants have been so relaxed that they've ended up wandering close to us, and we've been able to watch them at really close distances and listen to them feeding and kind of just moving about. It's been really such a special week in terms of elephants. And you can see it is starting to heat up. Look at his ears. Look how active those ears are in comparison to the bull that we saw earlier. The bull earlier was a gentle flap every few minutes, whereas this bull, his ears are pretty much non-stop flapping at the moment. And while we're sitting here, the sun is actually starting to really bake. I can feel it on my back. It's starting to get very warm now, and in fact we're even starting to get a little bit hot, and so that's why those ears are moving quite a bit. It's just to try and cool him down. You can imagine being a very large grey animal like this, how much sun you must absorb and how hot it must actually get. Are you sleeping while eating? His eyes are definitely closed. So Roshni, you're wondering what the best way is to respond to an aggressive approach by elephants. So when elephants are either trying to sort of warn you or they're just showing some sort of threatening behavior. Well, Roshni, obviously each situation is dependent, and it depends if you're in a vehicle or on foot. Now, if you're in a vehicle, the best thing to do is just to drive away from the elephant and leave it alone, and it will generally calm down and leave you alone. If it's a young bull like this, and he starts sort of head shaking at us and coming towards us and trumpeting, young bulls, unfortunately, as Brent says, need to be taught a lesson because they're being naughty. So they're trying to impose their size and their strength, but they're still not really big enough to do so. And so you've got to stand your ground and you kind of make a bit of a noise at them and shout and try and raise your hands a little bit and try and make yourself look a bit bigger. And that will then, the elephant will generally back down from that, particularly young males like this, and move away. And that's so that they don't get learned behavior that they can chase cars around, and when they get bigger, it becomes a problem. But if we're dealing with a really big adult male like what we saw earlier, a big adult male like that, if he starts to sort of show threatening displays, you can try and start your car and make a bit of noise, and that should generally stop them. Elephants are not a huge fan of loud noises. They don't really like it. If that doesn't, like I say, in the car, it's best just to drive away. An elephant will never be able to sort of outrun you, so in a car itself, so you just drive and leave that elephant alone. But on foot is a very different story. On foot, when you've got an aggressive approach by a bull elephant, you're going to need to stand your ground. You'd make yourself appear as large as possible, so use any sort of advantage that you have, a fallen over tree, a termite mound, anything like that, and get on top of it and make yourself as tall as possible. Put your hands in the air and try and get that elephant to be a little bit intimidated, and that generally then works. And slowly but surely you'll then back away and try and increase the distance from them. But the nice thing about elephants is they really do give you lots of warnings, and so you can generally pick it up long before they get far too aggressive that you're in too close proximity. Now, we're going to sit with our Ellie bull because he's being a gentleman now. He's started to feed, and it really is just pleasant sitting with him in the morning sunshine. And while we do that, let's go across to James Henry and see where he is and what his plans are for the rest of the morning, and if he's starting to head back for Amanda's delicious breakfast.
I am, actually. That's exactly what I'm planning on doing. Heading back for Amanda's delicious breakfast. We're sitting here next to the stump of Acacia girardii, a red thorn tree, and with the news that Hosanna's tracks have gone back south again. Naturally, obviously, why wouldn't they? Of course, I was trying to find him, and so therefore he has disappeared. And we have just had a wonderful time watching a fly being entrapped and ensnared and then caught by the spider in this web. Now what happens is that it flew into one of these knockdown threads, and then it becomes completely impossible for it to, and I've never seen this before, it becomes impossible for it to escape. Let me just get the right side of the light for you. It becomes impossible for it to escape because gravity sucks it down, and every time it moves, gravity pulls it down further. It can't fly properly in amongst these webs, so if it flies up, it gets knocked down again, and the closer and closer and closer to the bottom it goes, the more thickly or sort of ensnared it becomes, and the more impossible it becomes for it to move. And every time it tries to get off whatever piece of strand that has caught it, it flies up and gets knocked down further, and gravity just sucks it slowly and inexorably down to the final net, which is under there where my finger is. See it there?
I'll see your finger on the net.
Yes, okay, well that's where the very finely constructed net is. And then the spider, who is hiding underneath the branch here, somewhere here, comes rushing out, grabs it, and the fly ends up like this one here. Can you see that, where my finger is? That spider's been wrapped up in silk. You got it there? Mm-hmm. And I've never seen it before. I've often wondered how these knockdown threads work, and I assumed that the fly, or whatever it was, would fly into a knockdown thread and then fall sort of trapeze artist-like down onto the net. And that is not what happened. It tries to escape, but it is completely inexorably sucked downward. And I imagine if the fly was conscious, to know that no matter how hard you try, the more effort you put in, the further down you go, the more opposite the direction that you want to go becomes. It's so ingenious from the spider. Well, I suppose from nature to give the spider such ingenious method of fly murdering. Fergus and I were then both trying to put into the web because they were irritating us severely. And I kept putting my head down next to it to see if I couldn't sort of encourage a fly to fly into it. Let me do that again. Maybe it'll work this time. Fergus, is there a fly anywhere near my head?
Not at the moment, but if I know your head...
Naturally, there is not a fly anywhere near my head any more than there is a leopard for us to view. Walking along here, feeling depressed at our lot today, that, of course, we shouldn't be nearly as depressed as the scrub hare that was destroyed by those wild dogs today. And I wondered about its loss, and, you know, we think about constantly about, from a human point of view, we are traumatized by the loss of our family members and our friends. We're traumatized by the thought of death, and yet that scrub hare was just obliterated in seconds. And what notices, what kind of takes mournful notice of the demise of that scrub hare? No, I thought that was quite sad, really. Anyway, dear watcher, you're not too mournful about that. You're wondering about what kind of spider this is. I specifically didn't say its name because we do them quite often, just not often in this detail. It's a tropical tent web spider. And it's the only tent web spider that we get here. So if you see any kind of web like this with the knockdown threads and the net underneath, you know that it is a tropical tent web spider. They come in various sizes, but apparently it is the only species of tent web spider that we get here, which I think is quite interesting because they don't seem to be... Just hold there, Fergus. There's a fly in your hand. I'm going to get it ensnared. Because I won't... damn, it's gone. I won't mourn that like I might the scrub hare. Tristan is still sitting with his elephant, which seemed to be about as peaceful as the man himself, so let's head straight back there.
Well, thank you, James. I'll take that as a compliment. And yes, he is. Our bull Ellie has completely dismantled the silver cluster leaf next to us. At one stage, when we first arrived, it had 3 beautiful big branches with leaves all over it, and now you can see there is not one branch left, and it is now just a barren stick sticking up into the air. So this elephant has systematically destroyed it and has eaten probably all of about 2 leaves off that entire tree that it broke down. You can see all the branches are actually lying all over the ground there. And so that's what was all broken off, but really nothing was actually eaten out of all of it. It was more a display to us than anything else. Now he's decided he's going to start chomping on some bush willow. That's far tastier than a cluster leaf. And you can see it's in there, and he's actually not eating the leaves. You notice that? It's just stripping the bark. So there, the sort of tree is being rolled around inside there, and he's just taking off all the bark, and then you'll find he's going to drop that branch back to the ground. Now, what are you smelling? He's sniffing around quite intently on the floor there, and it looks like he might go... Sir Green Day, yes, the elephants do eat the cambium layer for nutrition. So what they will do is they basically are trying to get to that red layer because that's where all the sort of nutrients of the plant is. The cambium layer is a transport system, so it takes all of that sort of nutrients from the soil up into the leaves, and for all the photosynthesis and chlorophyll and all of that kind of stuff, and the nutrients coming from the leaves back down to the roots, and that's kind of where all the sort of valuable part of the plant is. And so elephants know that, and that's what they're after. They're trying to get to that red layer and get all of that into their stomachs so that they can spend less time feeding, and that's why they do it. Remember, an elephant has got to spend all day feeding, so might as well feed on the most nutritious parts of the plant than wasting time with dry leaves or bits of bark that don't really have much in them. It's just a waste of their energy. Spencer, this is an interesting one. You want to know what an elephant's favorite food is at Djuma? Well, it depends on the time of the year, Spencer. But if we are in February and March, then the favorite food is marula fruits. That will be the favorite for them at that time, and you'll find the elephants under the marula trees shoving hundreds of these fruits into their mouths. This time of the year would have been the torchwood fruits. That would have been one of their firm favorites, and they also really like the bush willows in the winter months. So in the winter months you'll find them eating a lot of bush willow and a lot of cluster leaf, but they're actually just eating the bark of those. They're not eating the leaves themselves. And then in terms of other things in summer, most of the flowers or any fruiting tree, the elephants will go after those too, but it's particularly the marulas and the torchwoods are some of an elephant's favorite foods at this time, or in the summer months. I see how Ellie's just moving off into the thicket, so I think we're going to carry on. I want to just try and see if we can't go around to Treehouse Dam, and if this is not just the bulls hanging off a herd and the herd is actually going towards the dam. It is warm enough that they might potentially go for a little swim this morning, so it would be worth trying to go and see. And you can see he's now getting himself his mixed salad, so he's had his leaves, he's had his bark, and now it's onto the grass. And that's actually another food source that they'll use heavily in the summer. They love panicum grass in the summer. They'll eat the seeds and they shove it in, and all that sticky gum that's full of sugars, that's exactly what the elephant loves. So you'll find they'll go after lots of panicum in the summer months as well. It's just getting rid of all that soil so it doesn't break down the teeth. Remember earlier we were talking about the teeth story and how they sort of wear them down. Now what? There's lots of space for you to go. Don't get grumpy with me. And so they will often use their sort of chest just to beat the grass and make sure that they get rid of any soil that could potentially be on the grass itself. Okay, he's going to stop in that thicket, so I think we're going to carry on and see if we can't find his herd somewhere around here. Maybe the herd is, like I say, at Treehouse Dam having a drink, or maybe a little wallow in the water. So let's head along there and see if they are there. There is another bull somewhere along here as well that I don't want to bump into. Now, I did also get an update, which is quite exciting, again for this afternoon. Maybe we'll get lucky, but Mvula, the old man which we were talking about earlier, he was seen at Sydney's Dam. So where we had the wild dogs this morning, he's lying there in the drainage line, but it's no way that we can see it, but maybe he'll come south. Now the rest of the herd is actually right here. They're all just stuck in this thicket. We've got a young individual that's much smaller. Now this would be, I would say, about a 10-year-old elephant, maybe a little bit younger. So earlier we were talking about the sizes, but that's about a 10-year-old. So Caleb, you're wondering if elephants ever chew on bones for calcium. Not that I've ever seen. I've never seen them actually actively seek out bones and suck on them for long periods of time. They might do it every now and then, but it's not something that they do as much as something like a giraffe or a kudu would do. Those two species tend to be on bones quite a bit, but elephants not so much. I think the thing with an elephant is it's got such a varied amount of foods that it can go after that it probably finds enough calcium in the plants and grasses and all the other things that it can actually survive off that. But it's not to say that they won't chew on a bone every now and then. I just have never witnessed them do it. In all the elephants that I've seen, they pick up bones every now and then and they'll smell them and they kind of put them in their mouth but not really chew on them or suck on them, and then they drop them again. It's a very quick process. So I've never actually seen them feeding for long periods of time and sucking a bone for long periods of time like kudu and giraffe would. So it's possible, I suppose. Maybe I'm wrong. I've just, in my experience, never seen them actually doing it. Unfortunately, it is the thickest of thick bush that this herd has decided to go into. It's probably because it's quite shady where we are, and it's certainly a lot more comfortable in the shade than it was in the sun. When we were sitting with that young male just now, it really did get quite hot on our backs, and it was starting to almost burn us, whereas now in the shade it actually feels quite comfortable and pleasant, and that's probably why the ellies are inside this little thicket as well. You can see them kind of just moving around. And that little one has obviously got a few issues with flies because its tail has been going non-stop since we've been around. And that's the youngest one that I can see in this particular grouping, and it's probably about a 5-6-year-old elephant, that, and then its older sibling would have been the one that was close to the road that just disappeared into the thicket, and then mom is just off to the left. So there's the older sibling just on this right hand side close to the road. So, Roshni, you want to know what age bull elephants begin to mate? Well, it depends again on the system and the amount of big adult males that are around. But generally, here in the Kruger Park, most of our bull elephants are normally only mating when they reach their sort of early 30s. and then they'll mate through their 30s into their 40s, and by the time they get into their 50s, generally they're being outcompeted by the younger 40-year-old bulls. But it's quite a long period of time. In some of the other reserves where there's not so many of the really big bulls, you'll find that male elephants will already start to mate at the age of sort of 25 or early 20s, but it's generally a little bit later in life, and that's because the bigger guys have first preference. They have size, they have strength, they have intelligence, they have experience, and so they tend to be able to dominate and get to the females before the younger guys do. Look at the little one, was just smelling us. You see that? So it's just put its trunk through the bush just to see what we are. I think it turned around and noticed us for the first time, although it's probably been hearing us talking for the last 10-15 minutes anyway, so it will know that we're here. But still doesn't have that much confidence with the trunk when it's using it to feed. Just watching it there, it was kind of sort of touching and feeling, but not really getting it right. But it's all very sedate from the Ellies this morning. So, Debbie, you're wondering if Ellies can breathe through their trunks and their mouths. Yes, much like us, it's the exact same thing. They can do both. Obviously, they use their trunks more than anything else. But I don't know if earlier you remember when we were watching that elephant bull and he was busy drinking. As he was kind of putting water in his mouth when he was finishing, he was exhaling out of his mouth, and the big spray of water was coming out of his mouth. So they do definitely breathe from both the trunk and the mouth itself. Now, we've got a horrible view of the young male in front of us that's going to the toilet. He's decided to show us what he thinks, and he's busy alleviating himself. Well, luckily he's now put his tail down. Come on, little one, it's okay, you can come through. Right, so we're going to sit here because we can't really go anywhere. I've got a young bull behind me, I've got this young bull in front, a female and a calf to our left, so we're stuck with these Ellies, and we're going to hopefully see them coming out a little bit better so that we can show you them all a little, show you a clearer view, should I say. And while we do that, I believe James is looking at rocks for some reason.
Yes, we are looking at some rocks, everybody. I've said to Herbert, are we going to do this rock segment? And he said to me, he sort of looked at me as I was mad, started laughing. I said, well, Herbert, have you found us anything else to look at? At which point he looked contrite, and now he's sitting up there and we've been talking about the rocks. So now we are doing a segment on something that is unable to move away from us and that we will not have to track. It is, I think, quite interesting. I mean, rocks may put you to sleep. It depends on your interest in whatever happens out here. But this is a sedimentary rock. And you can see it's a sedimentary rock. In other words, it's a rock that has been formed by sediment falling into layers. And you can see those layers very clearly stratified where I'm pointing there with my shtick. There they are. And many millions of years ago, and naturally, as inevitable as it inevitably, I have forgotten exactly how many million years ago it has been, but I will try and come up with some kind of answer at some stage. But what happened was that this was a sea. We would have been sitting in a sea, and slowly sediment would have built up over the many millions of years, and it would have sunk down to the bottom of the sea, and it would have formed this rock over, again, millions of years of pressure would have built up. The sediment would have turned to rock, and then the great tectonic movement that destroyed that sea and formed the lowveld as we know it today would have occurred. And I don't think it's any surprise that we're sitting on a drainage system here. In fact, the one quite close to Treehouse Dam where Tristan is sitting. What would have happened was during that time or period of tectonic upheaval, there would have been volcanoes and there would have been a great deal of smashing together of plates underneath the ground, and this sedimentary rock would have been turned onto its side, and that's why it looks like a sort of multi-layered cake that's been sliced and then turned over and put on its side. And that's basically what's happened here. And all of these things, if you were a geologist, you'd be able to say how old they were. But in every single stratification of the sedimentary rock that's been turned on its side by some long forgotten and ancient upheaval, long before any human was here, long before any animal was here, long perhaps before there was even life on Earth, the sediment would have started to form. So can you imagine the history that there is in this rock that we're walking over? And I think that's quite something to think about, really, that some of this rock may have been here since before life began, some 1.8 or 1.2 billion years ago. I think that's really quite amazing. Some geologists would be able to tell you exactly how old it was, but I myself am not currently clued up enough to do that. It is granite. It is a granitic... No, it's not. It can't be granite, you know, because granite is volcanic. It looks like granite, but this is definitely a sedimentary rock of some kind, so I'm not sure how it would have formed here. And Sally, you say all the way from Oregon that you love rocks, so I'm so glad you love rocks. Thank you, Sally. I quite like them too, and I can't find leopards and elephants and that sort of thing, like Tristan. I'm just having a slightly confusing thought, though, because this is very clearly sedimentary, but this is not... I mean, this is an area of granite, so this is unusual. I'd love to know exactly how this was formed and when it was formed. It might be a bit more recent than I think it is, but it is definitely sedimentary. Here's the granite. I mean, that's very clearly an igneous rock. In other words, it used to be molten lava. And you see the difference. There's no obvious stratification in it at all. It was once a bubble of boiling rock, silica, and various other minerals. And that's formed this thing. In fact, this probably was metamorphic. It's probably been changed many times over the millennia and over the millions of years by pressure under the ground. But what we're sitting on here is definitely sedimentary. And I don't understand why it's like that. V, you want to know how hard a termite mound is in comparison with a rock? Well, let me show you. Come over here. Here is a termite mound. Herbert has just vacated his seat in shame. He's headed north. That's not a termite mound at all. It is, in fact, a tree. V, let's just walk up the road here. We will certainly find a termite mound somewhere here. A termite mound is hard, but nothing like as hard as a rock. It's hard in the same way as sort of baked clay would be hard. But it is not... You could easily chip it away. Naturally, I can't even find a termite mound today. It's so embarrassing. Let's try again. There must be a termite mound here. We're surrounded by the things. Right, I'm going to track a termite mound while Tristan continues towards Treehouse Dam with the elephants.
Well, James, I feel like if you can track that termite mound, we shall issue you with a Master Tracker certificate immediately as the best tracker in the Sabi Sands by a long way. But if anyone can do it, I'm pretty sure you can do it. And we've done pretty much our own imitation of a rock. We have not moved at all, and that's because the ellies are all around us. We can't really go anywhere. They're just sitting, feeding on both sides of the car. The one little one is probably about 2 meters off the front left, and the older one is probably about 5 meters off our front right. You can see it right behind us there. Now, with the sort of size comparison that we were doing earlier, somebody has very cleverly already done it for us, and we've got a picture of it, so we can have a look. Now I'm going to just try to get the glare off the screen. Now you can see the size of that elephant there when I am standing up. Sorry, let me get a bit more shadow in there. Sorry, Craig. That elephant was very, very small. Now Craig's phone has gone off, so I'm not sure how to get that back on. Sorry, Craigie. It's my fault. Now, it's gone like you can see that I was standing pretty much at its tusk height. This elephant behind me over here is probably a little bit taller than me, and that would be a 10-year-old elephant. So you can imagine an elephant where my thumb is. That would be about the height of a 10-year-old, and then that's the height of a fully grown adult elephant. You can see he is absolutely massive. We don't realize how big these guys are when we're sitting in the cars because the cameras are often mounted quite high up, and so it feels like they're much smaller than what they really are, but they're actually really, really big individuals. So that is a massive, massive bull elephant, and he just didn't have the biggest tusks, but if you get those bulls with those big tusks, they don't get too much taller than what you saw there. Now, like I say, I can't really move at this stage, and which is not the worst problem to have. So being an imitation of a rock and sitting with a bunch of elephants is really not the worst thing. This little one is slowly but surely just peeking around the corner. Are you going to come out in front of us and come say hello? It seems like it. Seems to be a really relaxed individual. Baby elephants are often a little bit nervous of coming towards big objects, but this particular one seems as though it doesn't matter too much. It's probably because mom is standing right behind it, and older brother is close by too, so it really doesn't have to worry. You can just see that trunk sticking through. Look at that. Isn't that cool? Hello, little guy. Why don't you just step over and eat? So, Chris, you're wondering if elephants need any salt intake, and if so, how do they get it? Well, they probably do need a little bit of salt. Most animals do, and that's why in some parts of the world where they are breeding game animals, they'll often put salt licks where the animals can come and get that salt. But elephants will get it if they need it by eating soil. So I know that sounds very odd, but they'll find areas that are called sodic sites. Now, sodic sites are areas that contain high traces of sodium, and they'll then basically eat parts of those soil and take trunkfuls of it, and that's how they get that salt into their diet. So they are able to do that, and you'll find a lot of other animals actually do that as well. They'll feed off soils to get certain minerals that they can't get through vegetation. Alright guys, at some stage you're going to have to move away from my car, because otherwise I'm going to be stuck here for the rest of the day with you lot. And it's quite strange. Generally with elephants, they actually move quite a bit when they feed. They normally take a few steps, feed off a tree, a few steps, feed off a tree. But this lot is really just sitting right around us. They don't seem to be wanting to move at all. And like I say, I don't really want to start the car between mom's babies. I'm with her older sibling and her younger sibling, so I don't really want to give her a fright that I'm between all of them, and also don't want to give the little siblings a fright. So we're just going to have to sit it out. And like I say, there's worse problems to have in the world than to be stuck between a whole bunch of elephants. Well, I suppose unless they're very upset, then it wouldn't be such a nice thing to do. So Anna, their ears do grow through pretty much their whole lives, but the proportion in relation to their head changes. So you can see on this elephant here that we've got close to us, the ear almost looks like the same size of the head itself. When you get those really, really big old bulls, and I'm talking about the really old guys, their ears almost sort of dwarf in comparison to the size of their head. So they don't look really the same. They look as though they're a little bit smaller, but they actually do grow throughout their life. It's just that their head gets so much larger, and their trunks and everything gets broad, and so it just has that sort of optical illusion of the ears looking smaller than what they actually are. But if you look on adult females, you'll find as they get older, the ears grow with them, and they also get really, really big. So it does continue to grow throughout their life. It's not quite as bad as humans, where it becomes completely sort of noticeable towards the end of a human's life, where noses and ears start to grow and get very, very long and sort of look as though they are a little bit out of place. It's a different thing when it comes to elephants. They just kind of grow proportionately with their size. Now, I'm just trying to see if we maybe can just squeeze through this lot now. I think it's probably safe enough to do so, because the young male has just moved off slightly. Oh, excuse you. Sounded like he may have burped a little bit there, which is very odd for an elephant. Maybe it came out the other side. Either way, excuse you. Right, now we're going to try and see if I can't just squeeze through. Now, Rusty, don't over-rev now. Now's not the time to be doing such things. And while we do that, I believe James, the master tracker rock spider Hendry, has found his termite mound.
I am the great master tracker of the termite mound, and here I find myself sitting on the termite mound that I tracked, single-handedly, without help from anyone. It's good to be skilled, you know. It's good to have a rare skill that no one else has in the world. That you can consider yourself the best at something in the world. Good. Right. Let's see how hard this termite mound is. Here is a piece of it. Here is a piece of igneous granite. You can see exactly how hard it is. Not very. And eventually, I guess, bits of the mound like this become disused completely. And then I think they get opened up again from time to time. You can see there are no tunnels here at all. So it's not like I'm disturbing any termites. There. That looks like some relatively recent building activity. But now this is very easy with a, with a rock, but it's not easy with your hands. So something like an aardvark, which manages to dig its way into these mounds, has an incredibly powerful set of forelimbs and very powerful or very strong claws, same as a pangolin, which we discussed yesterday. So that, there you are, is how hard a termite mound is. And I'm sure that all of you were deeply fascinated by that, and are now very pleased that I've managed to show you. In the meantime, there is a huge sort of suite of different kind of vegetation that likes to grow on termite mounds. Before I tell you that, Ken wants to know if they produce heat. They do. Ken, and on a winter's morning, if there's a tunnel open, and often there aren't tunnels open in winter because, of course, it is cold, so the termites close them up. But you can see the steam rising out of the termite mounds. You can actually warm your hands there, and you will find, I think, the temperature inside a mound like this is fixed just above sort of 19 degrees. No, in fact, it's a bit hotter than that. I think it's about 24, 25 degrees Celsius or so. So it's very pleasant for the termites, and it would probably be pleasant for us too. And they close it up and open it up depending on the temperature needs of the colony and the mound. So it's a very effective air conditioning system they have in the heat, and a very effective insulating system they have in the cold. Most of the heat, of course, is produced by metabolic heat, which is lost by the termites. They don't retain their own heat. They produce a huge amount. You can imagine millions of termites underneath here producing a huge amount of metabolic heat, and that's where the heat comes from. This over here is a sandpaper bush, and they grow on termite mounds a lot. It's called Erita amina, and it might even be a puzzle bush. It might even be Erita rigida, which quite likes to grow on these mounds. And then you get, well, that's just I'm not sure what grass species that is actually. That's quite interesting. But you get a lot of this Gruvia flavescens over here. And that's the sandpaper raisin that also likes to grow on termite mounds. And Chris, while you look at that, you want to know about whether or not this is useful for building. Yes, it is. People used to use this, in fact still do. If you can't afford bricks, the soil of a termite mound makes an excellent substitute for bricks, and I know certainly it used to be very favoured in the days of wattle and daub housing, when I don't know if you know what wattle and daub housing is, but you put two pillars of sort of thick wood next to each other, and then you wrap, you put thinner pillars in between, and then in between those you wrap thinner branches, and that's how you make the wall, basically the skeleton of the wall. And then you cover that in some kind of plaster or substance. And what happens is you'd use this kind of soil, and you would also use dung. The dung from something like cattle or buffalo, if you could find it. And that's what would happen there. I know we're going to miss this, but there's a squirrel. Yeah, it's gone. Never mind. It's just one of those days. All right, let's carry on. So that's a termite mound, very useful for building, and in fact, with the very first place I used to work, there was a big termite mound like this with a hole in it that poachers used to live in. It used to be a poacher's, or let's call it a hunter's hideout. And there was a chap who lived on that reserve as a child, and he used to go and spend the night in the termite mound sometimes. They dug it out, and then they'd pull a kind of wooden shelter over the top, and that's where they'd spend the night if they were out hunting, if they got caught short at night. Sandy, you want to know if there are any fir trees around here? We answered a similar question yesterday for a young fellow called Skip in Texas, and he wanted to know if there were pine trees here. Sandy, no, there are no fir trees here. We don't get conifers naturally in Africa, as far as I'm aware. Maybe up north you might, but sub-Saharan Africa, as far as I know, there are no naturally occurring conifers or gymnosperms. Well, no, there are a few gymnosperms, but no naturally occurring conifers. So we don't get fir trees, we don't get pine trees, nothing like that. And of course, those are largely adapted to much colder climates, a really cold winter, and I think the needles of pine trees, for example, are really good in the cold, but we don't have, we just don't have that extreme sort of cold. So all of the trees here just about are angiosperms or flowering plants. Tristan is heading towards us, which means we'll probably get a lift home, and he wants to tell you about how he's going to try and avoid giving us a lift home.
Well, James, I would, but then I know you would beat me with your stick, so I'm not going to even try avoid giving you a lift home. I'll happily give you a lift home, particularly because you seem like you've covered a fair distance this morning, and I'm feeling in a generous mood given that we've had such a good morning, and I think Craig just wants some friends on the back there as well. Craig's being a bit lonely on the back, so we shall get him some friends and give James a lift home. Probably be the good thing to do. Now I can see his footprints are going slowly up here, and I'm pretty sure Herbie will try give me a fright at some point, and hopefully I won't be like James and almost run over Herbie. It was quite funny yesterday afternoon when Kirsty came to fetch us from bushwalk, and Herbie hid, and he thought he was going to give Kirsty the biggest fright, and Kirsty, the ever sort of sharp-eyed, eagle-eyed person that she is, had spotted Herbie long before then and kind of drove up next to Herbie and looked at him and said, "What are you doing?" And Herbie just kind of lost his whole impetus, and that was the end of that. It was a very funny situation. Now I can already spot Mr. Henry, watch him as he moves, slinking through the bush like a gazelle. Look at that, a man in his prime, striding away. Herbie in front, the perilous leader. And it's almost like our pack of wild dogs following this morning. And there's Ferg. This morning's bushwalk is definitely not a tall affair. Between Herbie, Ferg and James, I reckon they are probably our three shortest members of the male crew. What do you think, Craig? Huh? They are, aren't they? They're definitely a group of hobbits, you say. I'm sure James Henry would love to hear that he's just been referred to as a hobbit, and so would Ferg. But yes, they are definitely the smallest members of our crew, and I suppose for bushwalk it's an ideal situation to have, is to have small members of the crew kind of walking around. It means the antenna's low to the ground and very much harder to spot, so definitely a good team to have on the ground and walking around. Also, given that they all three of them know what they're doing, is also a valid component of the fact that they are a good team together. But we shall try and avoid. I feel like this could be relating to James's story, that we're almost like the Bejan that was going along, and we now are about to have three little termites jumping onto our tail and onto our back. What do you think, Craig? You weren't there for the story, were you? No. Lou, what do you reckon? Is this a termite versus rhino story that James told us yesterday? Hopefully we don't squash James's home. That wouldn't be ideal. But they definitely are doing a fair pace. I think the wild dogs were a little bit quicker, but they're not doing too badly at all. Right. We are creeping up slowly behind this individual who is in the prime of his life. And while we do so, let's go across to him and see what he's got to say.
What I've got to say is that I'm going to prolong this so that by the time the drive ends, Tristan is still behind us and can give us a lift home. So we're going to find what we can in the road here. I don't wish him to go past us because although, there's a reason people get that big. The reason people get that big is because they eat more than people like Herbert and the other hobbits in this crew, namely Fergus and I. And if we let them get home before us, they will arrive at the breakfast table, devour everything like ravenous hyenas, and we will be left with nothing to eat, and we will remain stunted and short, unlike the two enormous creatures you can see behind you there. Tristan and, of course, Craig. Jamie also says she eats ravenously. Yes, she does, of course. But, of course, there are anomalies in every situation. Perhaps Jamie is also a hobbit. She could be. Is Jamie a hobbit? Jamie's not really very hobbitish.
Elfin.
She's elfin. Yeah, she's much more elfin. Yes. Does she speak elfin, do you think? We must ask her. Perhaps Jamie could conduct the next game drive in elfin. She says fluently. Very good. I'm most impressed that she can speak fluent elfin. Let's have one quick look over here. We have 1 minute left, and I just wanted to show you quickly. This is where the elephants dug up the pipe the other day. They pulled it out of the ground here, and it has been very cleverly buried again. But what an elephant does is it comes along here, and it feels the water flowing under the ground, and picks it out with its trunk, and then drinks it and creates major havoc for all of us. Right, that is going to be the end of what was not an entirely successful bushwalk. It was a very pleasant walk indeed, but you had a massively successful morning with Tristan and Craig, so that is very good indeed. We will see you this afternoon at 3 o'clock. Until then, I hope that you will think of lots of questions to ask us when we go out next. Bye-bye.